Welcome everyone to the Department of Justice Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation, CTAS, Building Strong Grant Applications webinar. My name is Christina, and I will be your moderator for today. As we begin our presentation today, it is my pleasure to introduce our presenters. We have with us James Smith with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and Justine Sudo and Leah Gertz with the National Criminal Justice Training Center of Fox Valley Technical College. Starting our webinar today will be James. Go ahead, James.
Thank you, Christina. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our next webinar in the series of pre-application webinars that we have for the FY 2021 Coordinated Tribal Assistance Solicitation webinar series. As some of you may know, CTAS has several partners in offices that we work with every year to make this happen. Most of the offices are offices that actually have purpose areas in CTAS or programs, but they are BJA, EOUSA, they support us sometimes. The COPS office has a purpose area. The Office of Tribal Justice helps us get information out. We get guidance from them sometimes. The Office of Justice Programs is kind of the home office for BJA, OVC, and JJ, all of which have programs in CTAS. Then, of course, there's OJJDP, Purpose Areas 8 and 9. OVC, Office for Victims Against Crime, is Purpose Area 6. And then OVW is no longer in CTAS this year, but sometimes we still consult with them to figure out what things they're doing so that we don't conflict. So they're still one of our partners. The primary goals have always been for CTAS to increase access to tribes for resources and funding and all of those good things. We also realize that when applying to grants, especially federal grants, that sometimes the process can be very cumbersome and complex. We have tried our hardest each and every year to improve that and make it less of a burden for tribes. Understanding, though, there are just certain things that we just have to do, but we're always here and willing to work with you. If something does seem complicated or complex, we're here to figure it out with you. But that's just always been one of our goals, is to streamline. Also, we realized that having a large solicitation, at one point it used to be over 100 pages, can also be very intimidating. You'll be happy to know that we have cut that down. We are under 50 pages, and so it should definitely appear less intimidating. We are also excited about our new Just Grant system, which makes the whole entire process automated. This is the first year, so of course with anything new, it may not work 100% the way that we anticipate, but we are happy to be moving in that direction. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the critical review of the solicitation. So are you eligible to apply? For those of you, I always encourage you thoroughly read the solicitation, sit down and take notes to figure out what you're going to apply for, what things you may need. For this particular solicitation, only federally recognized tribes and tribal consortium and consortiums are eligible to apply. And we get that list, and we base that list based on a list that's put out by BIA every year. So there's like a National Federal Registry of Tribes, and we look to see if tribes are on that list. I will say one thing as well. I know that I said that tribal consortiums can apply as well. So let me just break that down just a little bit. So and I'm going to totally use this as an example, but let's just say you have Yurok tribe, and if you're on the call, I apologize, but your name always pops in my head, and so I'm just using you as a hypothetical example. But if Yurok was applying with 3 other tribes as a consortium, Yurok would still be eligible to apply by themselves as well. So I just want to make sure that folks understand that. That is the one and only way in which technically a tribe, they can be a part of an application and then they can do their own. So just wanted to make sure that you were fully aware of that. We always get the question, can you realistically complete your application by the deadline? Absolutely. It just requires proper planning and a good team. And, in a checklist and making sure that you're meeting deadlines, there's all kinds of ways you can do that. You can use your Outlook calendar, your Google Calendar, put key deadlines in there, use the checklist that we have, make your own checklist, make sure you have the key components, allow yourself enough time to do a thorough review, and enough time to submit. Just don't wait till the last minute where you're prone to make mistakes, but absolutely you can get this done by the deadline. What is required to submit an application? Well, there's some basic things that you're going to need. You have to be registered with SAMS. You have to have a DUNS number. This year, we have a new two-step process. So you're going to be registering in grants.gov first, and you're going to be doing your SF424 and your SFLLL. You're going to do those. And then at that point, you can go over to Just Grants to do your CTAS application within there. You are required to submit a budget, detailed workbook, and budget narrative for each purpose area that you're applying for. You're required to submit a purpose area narrative for each purpose area that you're applying for. You're required to submit an abstract, and you're also required, well, I should say this, you're strongly encouraged to submit an abstract. Most applicants do, and it's very helpful to us, and it's very helpful to them, so I encourage you to do it. You are required to submit a timeline, and we give you a template for that. We also give you a template for the abstract, so don't worry. We kind of give you examples of exactly how we would like for you to write it to make this process very, very easy for you. You are also required to submit a tribal community and justice profile. And then there's other key things that I won't delve 100% into because they're broken out in solicitation, but just know that there are a series of things that you need to submit. However, there are some things that your application will not even be considered if they're not there, and that's your budget and budget narrative and a purpose area narrative for each application that you or purpose area you're applying for, and then your tribal community and justice profile, which we also provided a template for. And I will certainly take questions on any of those things later on, but just wanted to put that out. If you need any type of assistance, so there's a couple of places where you can go for help. In the solicitation, several times, on our fact sheet, several times, and on our website, the Tribal Safety and Justice website, you will see all of those resources. But if you are having problems with grants.gov, there's a number in the solicitation and an email address to contact them. If you are having technical issues as far as Just Grants and submitting your CTAS application, there's a phone number for the Just Grants help desk and an email address for them. If you have general questions about programmatic stuff for the solicitation or funding or anything really, you can always reach out to the COPS Response Center at tribalgrants at usdoj.gov. Whoever answered that email address will be able to direct you wherever. Even if you contact the wrong folks, we'll be able to get you where you need to go by contacting that email address. So those are kind of like the areas you can go with tribalgrants at usdoj.gov being like the main hub. You can reach out to that and we'll get you exactly where you need to go. I will, however, say, whenever you call us or email us for help, please make sure that you follow the instructions that we give you to a T. That is very important. We've been doing this work for a lot of years, and so we've encountered a lot of situations, and so we're very well versed on giving clear and direct guidance. And when we're giving you that guidance, it's because we've had this before and we know exactly what it is that you need to be doing. What are the key components of a proposal? I kind of mentioned that already, but you definitely want to make sure that you have your purpose area narrative for each purpose area, your budget, your tribal community and justice profile, your SF424, your SFLLL. You want to disclose if you're doing any other applications, and the solicitation actually walks you completely through all of this. We have a checklist. We have things starred that are considered critical. So just make sure that you pay attention to those things. If you're ever unsure about whether or not something is required or critical, do not hesitate to reach out to us and email us. We can definitely get that answered for you. The proposal will be evaluated basically on, we know that you know your community and your problems and your issues better than anyone else. So we trust your word on that. It's basically, we evaluate the application on how good of a job you do with that based on what we're looking for in CTAS and what each purpose area is, or what is allowable under each purpose area and what the purpose of each funding is. We're going to look for thoughtfulness, completely. We're going to look for realistic budgets. If you have something in your budget and it's a lot of money or a little amount of money, we expect to see that in your purpose area narrative. Your budget and your purpose area narrative, for all intentional purposes, should be matching up with each other. They should speak to each other. They should be painting the same picture. If you're asking for equipment, it's not enough to just list how much that equipment costs. We want to see a description of that equipment and what it's going to be used for in your budget narrative. So, just be very detailed, be very thoughtful, paint a good picture, follow all the requirements. And while we can't guarantee that everyone will be funded, we will say that half the battle of getting funded or having a good chance of being funded is just making sure that you pour your heart and soul into this application, that you hit all the key elements and you do your best. I mean, sometimes we run out of money and so we're not able to fund everyone, but you want to go into this thinking and doing your best and trying your best to meet what we're asking for. So creating a timeline. I know oftentimes a lot of folks look at this and they say, oh, it's only worth such a small percentage. Why do we have to spend so much time on this? Well, sometimes I like to say that sometimes the smallest pieces provide a lot of information. What the timeline does for us is it paints a very good picture and it lets us know structurally how you thought about your project and what you're going to do with these funds and how it's going to play out over 36 months or 60 months or however long it is. That's what it shows us. It also helps you keep on track of, oh, well, this is what I submitted. This is what I got awarded for. This is what I need to be doing. We recognize that sometimes things change after you get awarded or halfway through. We just ask that you keep the timeline. It should be a living document that's always updated as needed. And if you're awarded, you keep your program specialist or your program manager aware of the changes. If something changes with your timeline as we're evaluating your application, feel free to let us know. But you definitely, it's a good idea to let us know, like who's doing what with these requirements and responsibilities with your timeline. So there's kind of like two things to think about when you're doing a timeline. There's what I just talked about, a timeline for yourself in terms of what your project's going to look like that you want to create with your application. But then there's also a timeline that you want to create in terms of just helping yourself get through the application process. And so it's kind of twofold. So when you hear us say timeline, we mean it in two ways. So just think about it that way. Here's kind of a sample of what that could look like, with key deadlines, what things are due. Certainly you're welcome to create your own version of this. This is kind of like a dummy version to just kind of give you an idea of what we were thinking, but we're open to your ideas and what works best for you as well. So yeah, I mean, in keeping in with the timeline, these are sort of the key things that you want to make sure are submitted with your application. Some of these things require you working with other folks in your agency. You may have to be working with the finance or the budget office. You may be working with key folks. So you want to just see what the solicitation says about these things, plug them into your timeline, give yourself a reasonable amount of time to get each thing completed. It's not enough to complete this. You want to allow yourself enough time in your timeline to make sure that you have time to review what you're planning on submitting. An outline. So you want to start a grant file or create kind of what I want to say like a application file, maybe not necessarily a grant file. And how I think of an application file, it could be a binder, it can be a folder, it can be electronic, it can be both. But you kind of want to have, if I was doing if I was applying for CTAS, the way that I would approach this is I would have a big binder. I would have the solicitation in there. I would have fact sheets from any purpose area that I'm thinking about applying to. I would have all the required forms in there, and I would have a checklist. And I would map myself out a plan as to what I need to do to meet all of these requirements. I would make notes about who I need to work with in my agency, what pieces of information and documents am I going to need to get signed off on. That's another important thing. look at what requires a signature and who's going to need to sign that. And you use all of those things to kind of help you through the application process. And let's just say you submit a successful application and you get awarded. You want to, that application file should become a part of now your grant file, which means that it should be a part of the information that you're going to add to your congratulations letter, your terms and conditions. All of that then becomes your grant file. And you want to make sure that anybody who is working on the grant or hired through the grant, that they understand what you submitted. They get a copy of this proposal so that everybody's on the same playing field and understand what it is that is expected of you by DOJ for this award. Again, kind of a checklist in terms of what things you need to have. You'll see some key pieces here. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but this is just a sample. You can find more details in the solicitation. Tips. So again, as I mentioned before, develop your own timeline. Make sure you stay focused. Set alerts on your Outlook, your Google Calendar for key dates. The way I like to do things, or how I would approach this, is kind of how I approached things when I was in college or grad school. If I had a paper due, not only would I have the paper due date on my calendar, but I would have 2 to 3 weeks out that I needed to start working on it. I needed to start doing research. So you want to have the main deadline, but then you want to have little interval deadlines that kind of help you get to the major deadline so that you don't miss anything. And whenever possible, this all should not fall on one person. You know, it's better to be a team approach. It is a lot of work, but not anything realistic. It should definitely be a team effort there in both putting it together and reviewing it. And you also want to plan for the future and sustainability. While we've seen several grantees get funded year after year, it's never a guarantee. And so we are hoping that, you know, when you do get awarded, that you're making best use of the funds and setting yourself up to be able to sustain in a way if you were not awarded again. And certainly in saying that, we certainly encourage you to apply every year that you're eligible, but we also just want to be realistic that every year we can't always award everyone. Questions to kind of ask and to ask yourself, is the project that or program that you're proposing to do in your application, is it financially viable? Is it realistic within the realms of what you can do with the support that you have? Does it meet your desired outcomes? Also, does it fall within the realms of what the funding can be used for in the specific purpose area that you're applying for? And does it strategically meet your issue? And also be very strategic. Like, if there is something you want, like, you can use funding from one purpose area to, you know, do one thing, and then use funding from another purpose area to complete that. So it's kind of like, if you want to have like a facility for like a tribal court or a police department or station or something, you can use funds from one purpose area for maybe the building, and then funds from another purpose area to actually staff it. So just be creative and think about it. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. We love to see folks apply across the board. So think about those key questions as you're deciding what to apply for. So it's time for a poll question.
And our question is, I am confident in writing a CTAS grant narrative. And the possible answers are strongly disagree, disagree, agree, or strongly agree. And as you can see from the results, we have 62% say that they are confident. We have 25% disagree, that they are not confident. 10% strongly disagree, and 3% strongly agree.
So next, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the budget process, but I want to be very clear and transparent that we will have, I think, 1 or 2 webinars geared solely on creating a budget for this, and we will have our budget folks from our Office of the Chief Financial Officer on, and they will go into more details. I'm just here to mainly scratch the surface of this, so just know that there'll be more detail coming in future webinars. This particular piece that I'm going to touch on is not meant to really go into the weeds at all. So CTAS budget process. note that certain things when you're creating your budget, we have templates and things that you can refer to on our Tribal Safety and Justice website. We have FAQs, we have a document with acronyms. COPS office specifically has a document for Purpose Area 1 with allowable and unallowable costs. We have a sample timeline. We also have a sample budget and detail workbook. And actually, I take that back. It's no longer a sample. We actually have the actual budget workbook that you would be downloading to your computer and filling out and uploading in Just Grants. We have that on this website. So if you go to that website, it's the actual form that you need to download and use. As a matter of fact, all of the templates this year, we got away with making them as samples. So you'll be downloading those directly from this site that's listed there and using those. And you'll notice when you go into them, as in previous years, they used to have a sample watermark. They no longer have that because they are the actual documents that you need to download and use. So things to think about when you're creating the budget, there's personnel. So then, of course, with that is fringe benefits, indirect costs. The big thing to know about indirect costs is to make sure that you have a current indirect cost rate. If you happen to get awarded and that rate expired, we would have to freeze your indirect cost funds only. But if you don't plan on having indirect costs, then it's not an issue. You want to include travel. Make sure you pay attention to the note that we put in the solicitation under each purpose area regarding travel and training. Look at any contractuals or contracts that you want to do, any equipment and supplies. With all of these things, the budget, there needs to be a narrative on each of these things. In the budget itself, you're going to put the numbers and make sure that they add up right. And we have a spreadsheet for you. While it's not required that you use that, we strongly recommend because it breaks out everything the way that we need it. However, if you choose to use your own document to do the budget, just make sure that it has everything that we're asking for in it. But as I was saying, you need to make sure that when you fill out any of these items, you have the exact cost and you have a description of what these things will be used for. And as I said before, when we're reviewing your purpose area narrative, we expect these things to come back up again in your purpose area narrative. As you're explaining your problems and your program and how it's all going to work together, if you're asking for key personnel, you're asking for travel and equipment and supplies, we expect to see in your narrative how all of those things relate together in helping you accomplish your goal. Personnel category. So you want to list each person and the name of the employee if applicable. You don't actually have to give the person's name unless you just know it. Like, we just want like the title. Show how they're going to get paid, the percentage of time devoted to the project. If it's someone that you're going to have working on another grant that's not DOJ, and let's just say they're spending 75% of their time working on the grant from us and 25% on their grant from HUD, then it needs to be reflected that you're only paying them 75% of their salary from the money that you're getting from DOJ. And your narrative needs to include a description of the duties of each position. And you can include job descriptions if you'd like. We like to see those as well. And just keep in mind that costs must be necessary, reasonable, allowable, and allocable. Fringe benefits category. Fringe benefits are those individuals listed in the personnel category. So you want to, typically when someone is employed or they get hired, there's benefits that go along with that. So those things are broken down within the budget template that we gave you. Just make sure that you're filling that out and that you're filling it out correctly. And what's included are the things that are listed right here: FICA, health, retirement, workers' comp, and base it on actual known costs or your approved rates. Again, costs must be necessary, reasonable, allowable, and applicable. Travel. So this is very important. As I mentioned to you before, we put very detailed information into the solicitation about certain required travel, and so make sure you pay attention to that when you're filling it out. Try to be as detailed as you can. Go to the GSA website to get the correct per diem and all of those kind of things. Certain things, anything that you can get exact numbers for, that's what we would like for you to use. And so you can see the list here of things that we kind of expect in that category. So I want to say one thing. We do realize we don't know where the pandemic's going to take us. So for folks that are interested in applying and you apply, and let's just say you get awarded, certainly we will be working with you to adjust your travel as needed, as we realize that we still may not be traveling like that in the coming months or the coming year. So we'll work with you on that if you're awarded as the time comes. I would say, for the sake of filling out this application, just assume that things are going to be back to normal and that you're going to be able to travel, and do it that way, because we can always work with you with alternatives. Next slide,
James?
please.
Yeah, James, if I could just add, this is Justine. I just wanted to add that if you have had this certain category of funding before and it asks you to budget for 2 people to attend an orientation for this purpose area, and you think you don't need to go because you've managed this project in past funding cycles, you do have to budget for it. Even if you get an exemption later on after being funded from your program manager, they might say, oh yeah, you're good, you don't have to attend this orientation, but you still have to budget for it, because a peer reviewer doesn't know that you've attended previous ones, and they only know that the criteria says you have to have budgeted for 2 people to attend orientation, so then it has to be there. If you get funded later on, you can always move that money out of travel and put it into a different budget category. But whatever it says in the solicitation that you'll be peer reviewed on, that is what you have to budget for.
And thank you, Justine. The other thing I will add to that is, the other reason why you want to just go ahead and put it in there is because we know that the rate of turnover is high. And so you may have new people by the time that you're actually able to travel. And you want to make sure that the new staff is well equipped and able to travel to this training to get what some of you other folks may already know. So that's another way to think of it as well. Thank you, Justine. Continuing with the budget process, the equipment category, just make sure that you're asking for things that make sense. Like, we're all for supporting computers, and in this current pandemic, we probably expect to see people asking for TVs and monitors and more, because we know that, folks are having to do things virtually. So we completely understand that. But just, it may raise a red flag if you're asking for 10 computers at $5,000 each versus 10 computers at $1,000 each. We look to see if things are realistic and reasonable. So just think about that. And we have actually sometimes Googled computers to see, well, we think they can get this cheaper. And so, just be reasonable in your costs. We're here to help you, and we don't want to deny you in any way, but we also want to make sure that we're good stewards of federal funding. Supplies, costs that will be expensed within 1 year. You want to think about it that way. Please make sure you don't put equipment in this category. There is a difference, and if you read the solicitation, you'll see why I'm saying there's a difference. As with equipment, though, you want to clearly state the purpose of the supplies and what it's going to be used for. We don't want to just see a bunch of supplies without any real justification for why it's needed. So just, we're here to support supplies. Just make sure it's reasonable and it makes sense and that it's justified. And again, that's where your detailed explanations and your budget and narrative come into play. Construction category. So when it comes to construction, there is one purpose area, and that's purpose area 4, that touches on this issue. There's also a new document on the Tribal Safety and Justice website under the miscellaneous documents on the FY 2021 CTAS page that breaks down some additional things for purpose area 4. So please refer to that document if you are going to apply. But just be very clear in what you're looking to do. Make sure you read the solicitation. My colleague, Julius Dupree, is the manager for Purpose Area 4. So if there's ever a question and that you need, you just reach out to the tribal grants at doj.gov email address and ask them to put you in touch with Julius Dupree, and he will make sure that any of your questions regarding construction and Purpose Area 4 will be answered. subawards, subgrants, and procurement. You want to pay specific, you want to make sure that you pay attention to this section, that you're doing it right, you're handling sole sources correctly. Understand that even if you subcontract stuff out, if you're awarded the grant, you're still responsible for all of the requirements and making sure that the funding is used appropriately. Even if you have a sub-grantee, it is still your responsibility. So you want to make sure that if you are subcontracting or having a sub-grantee, that it's someone that you trust, that they do good work, maybe not someone that you have to do a lot of follow-up on, that has a good reputation, because like I said, you're still responsible for this award, even if you subcontract out. A lot of grantees or applicants don't often realize that, but whoever is awarded the award from us is the ultimate person responsible for it. Other category, I mean, if certain things don't fall into the categories that we have, you can list it here. Here's some kind of examples of things that we've seen in that category. It's not meant to be an all-inclusive list here. We know that things can pop up and be different per applicant. So we leave that up to you, but you do have that category. Again, indirect cost, please make sure that you have a current indirect cost agreement. If you are awarded, like I said, if it happens to expire by the time that you awarded, or you just didn't submit one and you're awarded, we are going to freeze the the indirect cost portion of your funds until we receive that. And we realize too that a lot of the cognizant agencies, especially BIA, their National Business Center, can take a very long time to get you guys these rates. So if you're thinking about applying, I would say you should probably start working. That's one of the things you should probably start working on early, especially if you know you're going to be asking for indirect costs. There's always the de minimis rate, and we explain that in the solicitation, and there's more information. The solicitation also has a link that gives you more information and how we look at that and where to find information on that. A few things to remember. There's one workbook for all the purpose areas, but each purpose area has its own tab. There's also the budget summary, so when you're done, you can see a snapshot of kind of how you planned out funding for each of the purpose areas that you applied for and in which category. Please be sure that you read the solicitation in its entirety, highlight, flag whatever you need to flag, put key dates on your calendars, have reminders. Again, don't forget your indirect cost agreement. If you happen to be applying to Purpose Area 6, which is the only purpose area this year, and which you need a tribal resolution, you want to get started working on that early, but it's not enough to just have a tribal resolution. It has to be reflective of the year in which you're applying, and it needs to be dated correctly and appropriately, and it needs to be signed. Otherwise, if it's not signed, or if it's not for the correct year, then it's almost just like you didn't submit one. So you just want to make sure, because I know sometimes for certain tribes that has to go through your council, and that can take a while. So you want to start working on those kind of little things now, so that they don't hold you up later. When you're writing your budget narrative, just like when you're writing your purpose area narrative, you want to be very, very clear. Be very clear, be very detailed, make sure everything matches up. Again, your budget narrative should be your budget narrative and your purpose area narrative should be telling a reflection of the numbers and the items that you're asking for in your budget. And when peer reviewers are reviewing the application, they're going to look at both. When us as federal staff are reviewing your applications, we're going to look at both. So just make sure that you have those things. And please, please, please allow yourself, I like to say, at least 2 weeks before the application is due to get all your materials done. So get everybody on call or a WebEx call, and everyone that worked on the application, you all sit down, you pull out the solicitation, you pull out the checklist, you go through it. For all intentional purposes, act like you're the peer review panel, act like you're the DOJ review team, and look at your application the way you think we would look at it, and give yourself a fighting chance. I'm pretty sure you'll catch mistakes, you'll catch things that you feel like you may need to reword. You can make sure that you didn't miss anything, but if you wait till the day it's due to still be working and submitting things, 9 times out of 10, you will either submit something incorrectly or forget to submit something or run out of time before you're able to get it in. So just kind of remember those things. We are here to assist you. You can always email us and call us if you have any questions. Justine, I believe this is your turn now.
Let's check in with Christina first to see if there are any questions.
Okay.
Thanks, Justine. We do have 2 questions. And
sure.
The first question is, are you limited to a maximum number of purpose areas that one applicant can apply for?
You're only limited in the sense of how many purpose areas we have for this year. So, I mean, if you are eligible to apply to all of them and you think that they all fit your need, you can certainly submit an application, but you're only able to submit 1 application for each purpose area. And then just to piggyback off of something that I mentioned earlier, let's just say you're applying and you want to apply to all 8 and, individually as one tribe, but then there's another purpose area that you wanted to apply to by yourself, but then you also wanted to apply to as part of a consortium, you could do that as well. But there's only ever 1 application allowed per applicant for a particular purpose area. There'd never be a situation where an applicant can have, several applications for 1 purpose area, no, unless it's a situation where you're applying as part of a consortium.
Thanks, James. The other question we have, why doesn't DOJ use just the grants.gov system for submitting grant applications? GMS and Just Grants seems to duplicate and create unnecessary steps and complexities when grants.gov already provides the necessary platform.
I think that's a very good question. However, it's not one I can answer. I can certainly take that feedback back to my leadership, but I know that DOJ has spent a lot of time, effort, and money on this new system. It's brand new, so with any system, there's going to be kinks, and we're still figuring things out. But DOJ was very excited to kind of have, their grant applications be submitted through this system. So I can't answer as to why we don't allow everything through Just Grants. All I can simply say is I thank you for the feedback, and I will certainly pass it along to our leadership.
Thanks, James. And there's just one more question, and that is, can you briefly describe the 2 remaining CTAS solicitations that are intended to be released later this year? And do you know the timing?
The 2 remaining CTAS solicitations. So I'm going to ask a question. Hopefully the person that asked that question can hear me. I'm not 100% sure what you're saying, but this is what I think you're saying. I think because Purpose Area 7 and Purpose Area 5 aren't in CTAS this year, are you asking me when OVW and OVC, which are the offices OVW is responsible for Purpose Area 5 and OVC is responsible for the former Purpose Area 7, are you asking me when those individual respective solicitations will go out from those offices? So this is what I'm going to say. I don't have any key information on those solicitations yet. However, the person that asked that question, my name is James Smith, and my email address is james.a.smith@usdoj.gov. Send me that question to my email, and I will put you in touch with the folks responsible for those programs in those offices so that they can get you the exact information that you need, because they're going to know that better than me.
Great, thank you, James. And we don't have additional questions at this point, so I will turn things over to Leah to continue the presentation, and we'll take time for additional questions as we move on through the presentation.
Great, thank you, Christina, and thank you, James. It's an honor to be here with all of you today. Justine and I are going to transition a little bit and start talking about action planning, and we want to share with you today some strategies that might be useful in building out your strong applications. So this is really where we start, and where we want to start is at asking questions. So we're always going to put, when we're starting to evaluate and determine what our process looks like, we always want to start with the community that we're serving in the center and to be the focus. And again, action planning is just really about asking those right questions, so that way we're able to pair appropriate resources to answering those questions. We'll want to ask questions that are related to the projects and programs and the services that we're providing. We want to ask those questions and gather information from the community about what their perspectives are. Then we'll look at all of that information that we've gathered. So keep in mind that can be program statistics, program initiatives, community responses, all of that information we're going to pull together. And then we're going to look at all that information and really analyze it and identify if there's any gaps between what our community is saying should be and what the reality is. So that's really where we're going to start paring down. What is it that we need to do? We'll also evaluate what our strengths are within our communities, customs, traditions, and we'll use those strengths to help bridge the gaps that we've identified based off of those responses and those questions that we've asked. If we don't have those current strengths or resources or those abilities to be able to bridge those gaps, that's really where we want to start our action planning and looking for those solutions that some of these grant proposals can help you fulfill. So we know that you have some worksheets that are going to be available to you to help you guide through this process. And we're going to talk a little bit now about our situation assessment. So we want to start when we look at our situation assessment by asking these three questions. What happened? Where are you now? And where do you want to be in the future? So we're asking these three questions. It's really going to start painting a picture. It's really your opportunity to start telling your story of the community. And again, that what happened, where are you now, and where do you want to be in the future? Asking that question of what events or happenings have contributed to the problems in your community? For example, if you have an alcohol or substance misuse in your community, what might that look like? What aspects of your program or people have thrived and have nourished and enriched your community's quality of life? Presently, where are the gaps? And how could alleviating these gaps be an effective response to alcohol and substance misuse in the community? What are our areas of strength that need to be expanded or developed in response to those things that have been happening in the past? And then for the future, ask the question, if nothing is done to address these issues or challenges, what would happen to the community or to your youth or to your elders? Who is it that will be impacted? How do we fill in and identify why this is an urgent issue now? We're also going to want to look at what positive forces are working for us and how that can be leveraged to help us alleviate or address these issues. So just an example of how you would determine what's happened and where you are where do you want to be? These types of questions will give you focus to your planning. And that's going to really lead us to developing our guiding question. So for example, your guiding question is going to give your hypothesis or your theory of what we've been seeing, what's been happening in our community, and why it's been happening in our community. It should answer those first few questions in your purpose area template, which is really asking about what's been happening. So that's where you're telling your story. What's been going on in your community? Why is this a challenge within your community? What's already been done to address this issue? How we found things that have worked? How we found things and tried things that maybe haven't worked? What are those challenges that we have right now? So again, when we look at the worksheets, it will really help you break out, and I think Justine has pulled that up for it as an example, to really help guide you through this process and asking those questions. So one example that we have here is, how well does your community reintegrate formerly incarcerated citizens? Or what traditions or customs are available to help restore victims of crime and prevent repeat offending of returning those offenders? And so you can see how that's really starting to focus what it is that you're wanting to do. We know that especially if we're coming together as a coordinated planning team, that sometimes answering that question can be a process. And so really evaluating all of this information can be incredibly useful to breaking it down and streamlining our process. So the next thing is really identifying the difference between partners and stakeholders. And this is where we want to ask kind of these questions. And so I think one thing that sometimes we struggle with is, well, who's a partner or who's a stakeholder? And it really is asking those questions and really where they are at the point of interest. And so when we break it down into these three questions of asking what, who, and how, we ask what resources will the project need? What already exists? Who has the needed resources? This is a big one. Who has a vested interest in the project? And how will the project engage partners and stakeholders? And so really partners are where we have and we see those collaborations. So when we're asking what resources will our projects need, and maybe we're looking again, like the example, looking at addressing substance abuse. Is there a treatment center that we might create a collaboration with or an MOU with? Might they be a partner in our planning process? Versus a stakeholder, which is always generally going to include those that you're serving, your community, your leadership and administration. They may not necessarily be bringing a resource to the table, but they have a vested interest in the project and the project's success, and can also provide input as far as what the need is and how that's reflected in the community that you're serving. So we're going to talk a little bit about identifying the gaps, and between your data collection, right, when we're collecting all of that information from the community and analyzing that information, and answering the questions about what it is that you want to see in your community, that's where we start to identify the gaps. So this is where we want to say, what is your current condition? So this is answering the what is the current condition? What is it that currently exists within the community, and then what the desired outcome is. And that's really answering that question, what should it be? So we're painting a very vivid picture of here's what it currently exists. When we talked about our past, present, and future, right? We're telling that story, and then here's where we want it to be. Here's where it should be. And that's really how we start identifying the gaps, because based on what you know and what you want to change, that's going to streamline your process to help you improve or create programs or resources, and get those resources available to community by bringing that into some of your grant application. So Justine, I think I'm going to transition over to you now to talk about our vision and mission.
Sure, thank you, Leah. Hello, everyone. As you saw earlier, I am switching back and forth sometimes to show you in the workbook how you can follow along with these slides, and that the workbook can walk you through some of these things. Now, Leah just talked about creating a desired outcome. You've assessed the data, you worked with your peers, your stakeholders, your partners, and you're starting to formulate like what you really want for your community. And the solicitation does not require you to have a vision and a mission. I highly recommend it though, because when you are trying to take on a community-wide initiative, it's a positive thing if you can establish with your stakeholders or your planning team what your vision is for your project, because that is how you build momentum for change. Is if you share that vision for the community and the community buys into it and they agree with your vision. The other thing is to consider, if your department already has a vision, make sure that your mission for your purpose area application aligns with that department vision. If your tribe has an overall tribal vision for your community, then make sure your mission is aligned with that. That way you're not going to be working in a silo or in a vacuum. You're working concurrently with all of the other things that are going on throughout your tribal community. And this will increase the buy-in. So with the vision, you're asking, what positive change or desired outcome do you want to see as a result of your efforts? The mission, it answers these questions. Who are we and what do we value? Who do we serve and why, and how will you get there? So here's an example of a vision. A nation of healthy citizens guided by Oneida core values. I'll use this as an example because I'm part of the Oneida Nation. To make educated, and informed decisions in their daily lives and for the next 7 generations. So if I am going to be applying for perhaps a tribal youth program, Purpose Area 9 project, can you see how my tribal vision here could fit a tribal youth program? That if I'm going to be working with youth, that I would want to make sure that my mission is aligned with this tribal vision and aligning with these Oneida core values. And below here, you can see all of the core values. So here's an example mission: to develop trauma-informed approaches and culturally based interventions to address criminal thinking and behavior, as well as alcohol and substance misuse for our formerly incarcerated citizens. So this mission has to somehow align to the vision that I stated earlier. And if we want to have healthy and productive Oneida Nation citizens that rely on our core values, does this mission align with those core values? And if you can answer yes, then it's probably a pretty solid mission for your group to take on according to your justice system plan. Now, the solicitation for CTAS does not ask you for a formalized problem statement. However, if you can answer these questions, you will be able to develop a very succinct and concise response to these questions so that you're filling in those gaps using the purpose areas that you apply for. So what is the problem or the issue? And that gets at the scope and the nature of the problems that you're seeing based on that diagram Leah showed you earlier about how you will assess the data that you've collected and how you're understanding it. Who's affected by the problem? That way you know exactly who you are serving. Where does this problem or this challenge exist? Does it exist tribal-wide? Does it exist only in some of your community or tribal housing, specific housing sites, or all of them? When is the problem evident? Do you have a bigger challenge every year at powwow season or general tribal council meetings when everyone's gathering in the community? Is it during a high tourist season like summertime when people are going in and out of your community and then there's big problems that occur? And why does this problem occur? So these are the questions that you can ask. And I'm gonna point out to you on your handouts where this is in the workbook. Leah talked about identifying stakeholders. There's a worksheet here that will help you to identify who they are. You can list them and explain their role and responsibility, and that is important because the solicitation purpose areas ask you to identify roles and responsibilities. Here's an example of how you can help map out a case as it might come into your tribal justice system, whether it be through Indian child welfare or through a healing to wellness court. You can map this out, and this might help you to identify where your strengths are and where there are some gaps in the process. Here's an example of a way that you can document your resources and those groups that you work together with. Here's your data collection and needs assessment, assessing your community, assessing your program, finding out what you want to know, and you can use that situation assessment worksheet in the beginning to help you to determine what kind of data you need to collect. A short-term needs assessment plan. Now, if these weeks are aligned with when the CTAS application is due, you could use something like this to figure out how much data and information you need to collect and by when you need to collect it so that you can start to develop your project narrative. Under data analysis, identify the main issues that have emerged from your data collection. what are the things that stand out the most? And I wouldn't pick more than 3 or 4 things, because more than that starts to get pretty broad, and you want to make sure that you're focused on the CTAS purpose area that you are applying for. And then here's that worksheet for the problem statement. And again, the CTAS solicitation doesn't ask for a specific problem statement, but the more information you can provide, including data about where your challenges are, the stronger your case will be for applying for the purpose area funds. Peer reviewers will want to know exactly what is the problem, and they're going to want to know that your goals and objectives or your strategy is actually going to positively affect your problem that you have identified. So this, I have to laugh at myself here, because I was trying to think of a way that would be easy for you to remember the different aspects of an action plan. And I must have been thinking about my late brother at the time. And ironically, his name is the same name as our James Smith here. So I've been thinking about him, and I just remembered always being addicted and glued to this video game of Donkey Kong by Nintendo. So bear with me if you all remember this, and just humor me as I work through this action plan framework using Donkey Kong as the example. So I would say, based on what we just talked about, that Kong here is our community challenge, threat, or a problem. And if we looked at these barrels and this water bomb, some of you might know the actual word for that, I'm not sure, but the barrels and the water bomb are symptoms of the problem that we have from Kong here, because he's the cause of all of these things that are happening way down throughout all of our path here. And those things are helping to prevent us from getting on to the next level, and certainly from helping the young lady at the very top. Those are the way that the threat or the challenges show up in our community. So the scope of the problem in this situation, there are 8 barrels and a water bomb within 6 months that happen primarily during the summer season within our community. And the nature of the problem would be that there are some singular and some cluster events, and one seems to trigger another. So that's a way of looking at these symptoms of this bigger problem in a way that kind of helps you to understand and analyze, when do we see these problems? How often? That's the scope of the problem. How often, how many? That data is more about the numbers and the quantity. And the nature of the problem is, what does the problem look like? Well, here we're seeing some cluster events and some singular ones, but it seems like the singular triggers another event. So whatever these events are would look different to each community, but this is a way to sort of identify what's happening in a very succinct way in your community. And our desired outcome here is just to get to the next level. Save the girl, get to the next level. So we'd have to think about what that is, our vision for the community, right? So we can start to address this by setting some goals. And you can see in white here, I've titled 3 goals at different points of the platform. And these 3 goals are going to help us to get to that next level and save the girl. And we have objectives as these ladders. The objectives of, well, they might be the platforms, the smaller platforms, before we get to those bigger goals. And the objectives lead to the goals. And once we can achieve all of our objectives, then the goal might be easier to manage. So in one of our objectives, I might want to find strategies through a multidisciplinary approach to address the symptoms, in this case the barrels, but the symptoms of our bigger problem, which might be underage drinking. So an objective might be to reduce underage drinking by 20% in the first half of the school year. So our activities or tasks that will help us achieve our objectives, now this is the nitty-gritty of it. Those activities and tasks, step by step. What are we going to do and who's going to do it to help us achieve our objectives? The ladders that are broken, those could be barriers that we have to anticipate. Like missed deadlines or barriers to communication with our planning team, or maybe a barrier to communication is between victim services and law enforcement. So if we know that that's part of our problems or our challenges, then we can address that within our strategy for our purpose area narrative. You could anticipate those barriers, and you can spell out to the peer reviewer or the reader what you're going to do to address these barriers, or how your activities are going to help eliminate these barriers that you might be threatened with. So here again, in a more orderly fashion, here are the goals, followed by objectives. And you can see, like from the middle one, there might be multiple objectives that you'll need before you'll have any impact in achieving a goal. And sometimes these activities or tasks to achieve your objectives, they'll happen sequentially, one after the other, and sometimes they can happen simultaneously. If you divide up the work, maybe you've got a planning team who is helping you to implement your project, and your goal, and you've got subcommittees, and each subcommittee might be working on one of the objectives, and then they would all have tasks and responsibilities to achieving those objectives. So I hope this makes sense to you. Leah, who is much more, I think, concise than I am usually, so I'll turn this over to Leah, who will re-explain these things. Leah?
Yeah, Justine, that was a fabulous visual. Hopefully a lot of our visual learners and everyone who just likes to see things laid out, I think that was a great example of really bringing it all together. So definitely a shout out to the creativity and the explanation. So great job. As Justine mentioned, we do want to talk a little bit more about goals, objectives, activities, and hopefully you keep the visual of Kong and all of the challenges within the community and in the back of your mind as we start breaking it down a little bit more to putting really the nuts and bolts of your action plan, pulling that all together. And so again, in your workbook, you have these worksheets that will support you and have these questions identified in it. But really, as we start looking at answering and identifying what our goal is, we want to ask these questions. And so the first question is, what positive change do you want to see as a result of your efforts? So it's really thinking of the outcome as we've identified, we've collected the information, we've analyzed it, we've identified our strengths. We say, this is our gap. Here's where we start breaking down. Here's what we're going to do to address it. And here's what we're hoping to see as a result of what it is we've proposed that we're going to do. What are those results for successful completion of your project? So if you say we're going to implement this and this is what we're wanting to see, how do you know that you've been successful in that? What is the roadmap that you're going to take to get there? So we know that we say, here's our outcome and here's where we want to end up. We know there's so many different moving pieces and so many different things that we might need to do to get us there. And that really is breaking it down at that step-by-step. And Justine will talk a little bit more about action steps, but really what are those steps in between that are going to help us accomplish that goal? And then lastly, and really important, is how do you know when you've reached success? How do you know that what we've done is working? Are we going back to the community? Are we collecting data? Are we getting feedback? What do we have in place to know that we are successful in our efforts, or that our efforts are making an impact within the community to address the challenge that we identified previously? So we're going to talk a little bit about goals. And again, there's worksheets that will support you brainstorming this out for those of you that are interested in that. But a goal really, like Justine had said, is the broad general statement of what it is that you're wanting to accomplish. And this really ties back, and we know that your vision and mission are not a required part of your CTAS application, but that really is going to help guide your efforts and what it is that you're going to do. And so even if you're not including your vision and mission, your goal is really a way to say, here's realistically what we can accomplish. And so we know, especially when we're addressing community challenges, that this is really where a lot of energy comes from, and there's so much hope and optimism for here's what we could do, and if we had endless resources. And this is really our way to say, yes, that's our far-off goal, but what are we going to be able to accomplish within this grant period? What other resources can we bring in here to support this over this period of time? And so it really brings in that kind of feet on the ground perspective or view, rather than the 30,000 viewpoints of these endless possibilities. Because if we don't narrow it down, sometimes our projects can get a little fuzzy, and we don't exactly know where we're going. And a peer reviewer honestly isn't going to know where your roadmap leads. And so it really is translating those visions of optimism and hope and things that may not be achievable in our lifetime, but think, here's our first steps to achieving that. So really that realistic component is where we're looking at narrowing down our goals. So goals are also those broad general statements of what you're wanting to accomplish. It translates your vision and your mission, again, that realistic component, and it identifies the relationship a little bit further between the goal of your vision and your mission. And it's not overly specific though. So it specifies and it's specific to a point, but it doesn't really give those tangibles of here's what we're going to do. It's saying it's not saying here's how we're going to do it. It's saying here's what we're going to do. And then later on when Justine talks about your objectives and your activities, that's really saying that how we're going to do it. So again, it's that broad general statement. So we have some examples here for you as we start differentiating between goals, objectives, and action steps. And so a good example of a goal might be to use a trauma-informed care approach to address child abuse and neglect. So in this example, maybe we collected all of this information and we identified, well, we don't maybe have appropriate resources. We see a high need, and we see a high case number of child abuse and neglect happening within our community, and we don't have the amount of resources. That was one of our gaps to address this problem. And so again, this is saying what we're going to do. We're going to use a trauma-informed care approach to address child abuse and neglect. Again, it doesn't include the how we're going to do it. It's just saying what we're going to do. And then the second goal under that might be create education, prevention, and intervention programming based on cultural and traditional values. And again, to develop this goal, this is where we're creating those linkages back to identifying and analyzing and collecting information, and saying, maybe we did a community survey and the community's like, well, we really need some resources. We need to know and need some prevention programs, or we need some educational programs to help address this. And so again, when we develop our goals, we always want to see those linkages back to what we started with is really that analyzing and that framework and pulling it forward and saying, here's why we're doing this.
So in this example that Leah shared, there's nothing here about how you're going to achieve any of these things. And that's where the objectives come in. The goals, like Leah said, they're more broad statements. They're like that higher level, but your objectives now are going to become specific to addressing the challenges that you've already identified, measurable, so that you'll be able to measure a difference between where you start and where you end after implementing your project. You're going to see a growth or a change in something here, an increase or a decrease in something. They're going to be achievable, and some people will say realistic too. We want them to be achievable, especially within the lifetime of the grant that you're applying for. The grants are to help you implement your ideas to address a problem, so they have to be realistic and achievable. And I say relevant here for the R. Relevant to the problem that you identified earlier. They should be relevant to the goal that you've set for your project. And they should be relevant also to the people that you identified as your clients or the people that you want to have an impact. Everything ties back to, and it ties back to the mission also. Your objectives should be relevant to the mission you identified. What are you going to do with this grant money or with this project? And are they relevant to eventually achieving your vision, which, as Leah said, might not happen in your lifetime. But objectives should be timely also. You should be able to not only measure a change or a difference with your objectives, but you should be able to put them on a timeline and mark certain milestones that you achieved towards the completion of your objectives. And once all of your objectives related to a goal are met, then theoretically, your goal will have been met also. Objectives describe how you will achieve your goals and what will be completed within that certain period of time. Now, here are some sample objectives that go with the goals that Leah read to you. And if you want a sample of these on your worksheets, the handout worksheet has a sample case study, so you can follow along with where we're at here. Now, goal 1, trauma-informed approach. Objective 1 for goal 1, by the end of the second month of the school year, our multidisciplinary team will address child abuse and neglect issues being witnessed at the tribal primary school and meet on a monthly basis. It's pretty long, I know this one is, but it does definitely meet the SMART objective criteria. When it's time bound by the end of the second month of the school year. Who is going to do this specifically? It's our multidisciplinary team, and they're going to address the child abuse and neglect issues. Where is this going to happen? At the tribal primary school. How often are they going to meet? How are they going to get there? They're going to meet on a monthly basis. Objective 2, within the first 3 months, our multidisciplinary team will draft a new protocol for school staff to follow upon discovery of a suspected abuse or neglect incident. Your activities and tasks, those were the ladders that you were climbing up step by step to get to an objective. Approaches that are incorporated in addressing the identified problems. They're going to be tailored activities to the problem and not just the symptoms. They're the actions step by step that will allow you to achieve these objectives. And they should also spell out who is responsible for this, who is responsible for enacting that activity. In our example here, who is going to be convening these meetings on a monthly basis? And how are you going to determine what the schedule will be? So those are some things that the objectives or the activities or the tasks are going to help you sort out related to those objectives. Questions to ask: does this activity meet or address the issue? Is it aligned with our mission? Is this approach financially possible? Now, the solicitation will not ask you for specific goals, objectives, tasks, or activities the way we've outlined them here and the way they're outlined in your workbook. That framework is just an example for you to follow if you choose to. What the solicitation does ask is, what are you going to do to address these challenges you identified? So this is a very succinct way to explain what you're going to do. And these are the things that will go on that timeline that you'll download from CTAS, from justice.gov/tribal. You'll see the CTAS solicitation there under the grants, and you can download your timeline. That's where these activities will go, and that's where your goals will go. Now, if you want to be more broad with how you describe it, a lot of people use goals and objectives interchangeably, or desired outcomes. We use the word desired outcomes a lot because sometimes desired outcomes are what you think of first. Well, we want XYZ to happen for our community, and then it's too broad to plan very succinct objectives for. So then we create goals that will help us achieve that desired outcome. So that's kind of why we use that desired outcome in our planning example. But this is the important thing. Whatever your community chooses to use, make sure that your language is succinct. Make sure that the same verbiage is used throughout your narrative. Don't talk about a goal to be one thing in one part of your narrative and then call it an objective later on. They have to be used consistently. So whatever you choose to use, just use it consistently throughout your application. And here again, as an example, it's in your workbook. We talked about the goal, the objective, and now here's an activity. Identify the team members and resources and invite them to participate in monthly meetings. Social services will be responsible. And then we even have a potential list of invitees: school staff, therapists, law enforcement, social workers, victim advocates, and the tribal chairperson or designee. All right, I'm going to turn the time back to Leah to talk about the value of collaboration throughout this whole planning process.
Great, thank you, Justine. And I think that I'm really glad that we always end on collaboration, and hopefully throughout our discussions today, that's one of the big key things that everyone takes away from here is how vital collaboration is. Hence, even if we look at the Collaboration Act, is a collaboration and coordination, and really looking at CTAS and bringing all of these program areas and all of these funding areas together and encouraging us when we're evaluating the challenges within our communities and looking at bringing those resources in through grant funding, what that looks like in the broad picture of serving our community in a good way. And so we know that generally working together is going to help us provide the best service to our communities. And so we just wanted to close out before I turn it back over to James with talking a little bit about collaboration and really where those needs come from. And so as we start looking and we're like, CTAS is coming, we all have our ideas from our own departments. Well, here's what we're going to want to do. Here's what we need to do. Here's one of our big challenges that I want to address. So really coming together to share that information, have those discussion of what our problem area is going to be that we're going to be addressing is going to be vital to really streamlining that ultimate resource that is provided to our community. And that can be even looking at increasing protection to the community. If our programs are saying, we're going to provide this resource, how is that going to be reflected throughout all of our programs that are receiving this funding? How will we analyze to say, maybe we see that child abuse and neglect is an issue within our community, but keeping in our lane and knowing how our own departments work and what our capabilities are, is how is that reflected in our own way through our own department service? So really, if we're looking at it from a protection standpoint, it's having that similar message. It's saying, yes, we all understand that this is the problem, and here's independently how it is that we're going to help address this issue. It really helps you to share information. So a lot of times we know our information, our programmatic or our departmental data is sometimes very near and dear to our hearts, and we don't always like to share that with everyone for multiple reasons. Sometimes it's because we don't know how the information is going to be used or what it's going to be reflected to say. But really getting that big picture, when we talked about in the beginning of how do we really identify and collect information to analyze that, to be sure that we're addressing a problem and not a symptom of a problem, is really understanding that that we have the data to support this. And that's going to substantiate anything that you put in your grant is not only being able to reflect, well, in the court system, we had, X amount of domestic violence cases come through our court, but it can also be our law enforcement has experienced this number of calls, our victim services program, if it exists, has provided this number of services, and here's what we're seeing. Our social services has responded to this many calls for child abuse and neglect cases, and our court has processed this many cases. And so it really does enhance the impact of your application, and it really helps paint that picture that we talked about when we talk about the past, present, and the future. It really helps paint that vivid picture of letting the reader, the peer reviewer, of letting the funding agency understand why this was your priority need, why this was your area that you wanted to address, why it's so important right now. Additionally, it really allows folks to come together when we talked about our partners and our stakeholders, and allows them to understand what their roles and their responsibilities are going to be in moving forward. Are they going to be working with us on sharing a resource? Are multiple departments addressing maybe a similar issue? And we can say, well, maybe rather than hiring 3 staff that we may not be able to maintain, we can hire 1 staff, and they can share responsibilities throughout all of our departments. And that might be a position that we're able to sustain. What are the responsibilities? Are there contributions that may not be funded under a grant cycle or under the grant funding that we know we're going to have expectations of people maybe to come to meetings or to review information or to be decision makers? And so there's all of these different aspects when we talk about collaboration that impact your grant process, but ultimately impact your community in a good way. And so as we close out, we just want to remind folks, have meetings, have conversations, hear each other out, share your information, really create that platform for coming together and asking that question of how are we collectively going to serve our community in a favorable way. So it's been great to be with everybody today. Justine, did you have anything that you wanted to add before we hand it back to James?
Yes, I'm just curious, what has worked for the people who are listening? Because I know we have participants who could be teaching this. They've been very successful in the past with their CTAS applications. So I'm curious if they wouldn't mind sharing in the chat, what has worked for you to ensure that you are working collaboratively across your different justice system entities to plan for CTAS applications. I'd love for you to share that with the others who can benefit from it.
And Justine, there are some there's comments coming into the questions box, and one is having one person who coordinates the entire grant.
Yes, that's very helpful, because that person is like the hub of a wheel, right? You have the spokes of a tire that go out to all of the different justice system entities or partners, whether it be law enforcement or victim services, children's justice, the school system, reentry program, whatever the case might be. If there's one key hub who can coordinate the activities of everyone around, that person is just so valuable, because then all of the other departments just have one person to go back to when they want to get some information or data that another department might have shared. And that one person too can be responsible for scheduling meetings so that everyone can come together face to face, or at least through a conference call or a Zoom meeting for planning for CTAS. That's so important. What else,
I would add to that as well, that definitely having that one person to help coordinate some of these planning efforts is a great strategy while being able to submit a comprehensive plan. But it's also important as we look at funneling information to that one person, that really our roles and responsibilities are identified as well. Because I think sometimes when we have that one person, and if we don't clarify in the beginning that we still have a role and responsibility as departments or programs that are funneling that information there to assist that one person in identifying and thoroughly understanding all of the information that's coming into them, and that it's not just, oh, you know, here's my box of information, figure it out, that it's still identifying how we're going to work together to support each other or support that one person, say if they're your grant writer or, you know, responsible for collecting that information.
Hi, this is James. Sorry, I wanted to comment on that as well, if that's all right. So I certainly appreciate and think having one person coordinating is a great idea. But allow me to play devil's advocate for a second and think about it another way. I think it's great, but I think it's great if that is done with certain other provisions. And what I mean by that is oftentimes folks will have one person coordinate the grant, and that translates to that one person doing all the work on the application and the grant. And I don't ever think that that is a great thing. I think it's great to have someone who keeps everybody in order and truly coordinates, but that should be it. I think, you know, everyone should be aware of what's going on. I think more than one person should be aware of what's going on in the application process and developing the application. And on the onset that you are awarded, I think that same approach needs to happen when an award happens. And I'm only speaking from experience and working both sides of it. So there's been horror stories and nightmares where folks have depended on one person who was supposed to be the coordinator, but it turned into that one person doing all the work for various reasons. That person up and quits or gets really sick, and then you don't have an application to turn in. So that's a nightmare. So if that person's truly going to be a coordinator in the coordinating sense of the word, then yes, fine. But there should never be a point where that person holds all the keys to the kingdom. If that person gets sick or quit, then you guys are stuck in a creek without a paddle. You don't ever want to be in that situation. So just understand what that means and make sure that the person is truly just coordinating, but everyone is aware of every step of the process and what's going on. On the flip side, if you are awarded, there should never ever just be one person doing everything. There's been horror stories when I've gone out to do monitoring visits and that person is sick or quit, and folks are in the room staring at me because they have no idea what's going on with the award. And it's just never a good business practice to have one person holding all the keys to the kingdom. I agree there should always be a person or maybe more than one person who is good at coordinating everything. That is fine. But everyone that's playing a part of the application or playing a part of the grant and working on it should always be aware so that you're never stuck in a situation where only one person can speak to things. So hopefully it's clear what I'm conveying. Again, I do like having someone coordinating all the pieces. That's great, but that should be relative and that should be compared to also realizing that that doesn't mean that everyone should know what's going on. And hopefully that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. I'm so glad you clarified that, James, because the people who are like grant writers, more specifically, or community planners, or the court administrator is probably gasping when I said that if they thought that I meant that they were responsible for it all. You're right. Coordination is simply that, coordination. It's not the one who does all the work. Are there other questions, Christina?
Yes, we have some additional comments. Another one is planning ahead by doing the purpose area 2 planning. That is an agreement for all the future, or for the future of all departments under justice.
So there's one coordinator for purpose area 2 project?
They just said planning ahead by doing the purpose area 2 planning, which is an agreement for the future of all the departments under justice.
I can appreciate that too. So the purpose area 2 application that is comprehensive, community-wide, justice system-wide strategic planning definitely entails all of the departments related to justice and health and healing and treatment and probably housing and education. So if you treated all of the program areas like that, where you got the perspectives of everyone to come to the table, that is strengthening for your community, for your justice system, for improving coordination and communication between partners. That is so important. And especially for Purpose Area 2, it's a requirement. You're required to work with a planning team that is consisting of all of those different entities. And the reason for that is because people see things differently. If there was a house that maybe they were manufacturing methamphetamines in that home, law enforcement would approach that home differently than Indian Child Welfare would approach that home. And they might approach it differently than housing would approach it, knowing that they have to abate this home and make it livable again, if it's even possible to do so. So we need the different perspectives and that collaboration across stakeholders so that we can fully understand a situation and not see it just through our lens, but from the perspective of those other organizations that we would partner with, that we would rely on, and at least that the community would rely on.
Excellent. Thanks, Justine. And we do have some additional comments. Plan ahead several months. Have a lead for the CTAS grants to set up the meetings for each of the purpose areas. Meet regularly to set up timelines, and have someone that kind of helps to keep the project going with overseeing that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you don't have to wait until the CTAS solicitation is released. You know, every year it's going to be built at least off of the foundation from the previous year. So you can plan for the CTAS solicitation at any time. And then when the actual fiscal year solicitation comes out, then you take your highlight marker and you just go through where all the changes were and what still stands that would support the planning that you've already started. Yeah, don't wait for that solicitation to drop before you start planning.
And there's one other thing I want to add to this, and I guess I want to say this now while it's still early in the process. A lot of times, and I get, and I don't even want to say this is a mistake because it's not a mistake. And I'll preface this by saying I certainly understand why applicants and grantees refer to certain things the way they refer to them and the way I'm about to say it, but I just want to provide some clarity for folks. And even us as DOJ staff sometimes are guilty of saying this, but I need to make sure that you guys understand that there is a difference. So when you say CTAS grants, there are no CTAS grants. I want to be very clear that CTAS itself is not a program. It's just simply an umbrella in which separate tribal programs function. So when you say that you are awarded a grant under Purpose Area 3, that is not a CTAS grant. You are awarded a Purpose Area 3 grant or whatever that grant real name is for Purpose Area 3. So I just want you to get in that mindset of thinking, because what happens is oftentimes grantees will call and they'll say, oh, I have this CTAS grant, and no one will know what they're talking about with the exception of the folks who work on CTAS. Most folks will, when you call in and you're asking for these grants, you need to be able to refer to them by their real names, and their real names are listed in the solicitation. So it'll say Purpose Area 3, and then it'll say what that program name is. It'll say Purpose Area 4 and what that program name is. So, but I completely understand why it's so easy to say I have a CTAS grant, but in a technical sense, you don't, because CTAS is not a program. It's just an umbrella or a structure or a mechanism in which we have been able to put various or separate funding streams, separate DOJ tribal specific program funding into one solicitation, but you are still essentially applying for different purpose areas or different funding streams. So I just want to get everyone thinking in that terms. Certainly, I'm not bothered if you say it to me. I know what you're talking about. I know CTAS very well, but I just want to avoid you frustration if you reach out to other folks and they may not know what you're talking about. They're going to know the actual program name. So I just wanted to clear that up.
Great, thank you, James. And Justine, we have another comment on collaboration, and that is reaching out to the applicable departments, such as the police department, the courts, domestic violence, child welfare, and let them tell you what they need, and then ask them to tell you why they need it, preferably in writing. And then get tribal leadership to approve this request before doing all of the budget narrative work.
That's a great idea. It's important to know the why behind what it is that you need. And just identifying needs from department by department is important. Ideally for a CTAS application, that community justice and community profile will want to know like specifically why you're asking for certain equipment or why you're asking for funds to implement something. So hopefully you have that data or that explanation that you can provide. But part of sustainability for any program area or department is having the right tools to do the job. And if you don't have the right tools to do the job, that's where people fall through the cracks. That's where you get staff turnover and frustrated. People may be burnt out because they're expected to do this job without the right materials, without the right resources. So that list that you could brainstorm too of just writing down what you know you need to do your job better is something that you can apply for. And in your attachments section, there is a worksheet called Planning and Sustainability SWOT Analysis that is strengths, challenges, opportunities, and threats. And that worksheet will help you to identify what those needs are. So definitely go through that with your planning team.
Excellent. Thanks, Justine. And we didn't have any additional comments on collaboration at this time.
Thank you all. Funding opportunities and training and technical assistance resources, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. So for OJP, which several of the offices which have purpose areas in CTAS are under the OJP umbrella, you can go to this web link here to see different funding opportunities. You can also go to BJA's website directly, OVC's website directly, and OJJDP's website directly. And then you can also go to COPS's website. And just for a little background, in case I didn't say this, for those of you who may be completely new to CTAS, right now the components in CTAS are COPS and OJP. And underneath of OJP falls BJA, OVC, and JJ. And along with COPS, they make up the current funding streams that are currently in CTAS right now. And then even though OVW is not currently a part of CTAS anymore, they do offer tribal funding. And so we wanted to make sure that you knew where to look at their websites to get more information on their tribal funding opportunities. And I also believe that someone asked me earlier on if I knew when the different funding streams would be coming out for OVC and OVW. I do know that OVW's it used to be Purpose Area 5, the Tribal Governments Program. I heard recently, as in maybe 30 minutes ago, that their funding for the Tribal Governments Program should be posted mid-February. But like I said, that person that asked that question, still send me an email and I'll put you directly in touch with OVW. We encourage you to manage your subscriptions. This is where you can sign up to receive information on the Tribal Safety and Justice website, to receive information about CTAS, tribal specific information. You can also do that same type of approach. And with each of the individual websites, COPS, BJA, OVC, and JJ. We also have this it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's like a tutorial, but it's like a guide in helping you apply and understanding CTAS. I think it works great, especially for someone who's completely new to CTAS. For those who had several grants underneath of the CTAS umbrella and completely understand CTAS, you may not need to look at this. but for those who may be completely new to CTAS, I would strongly encourage this. Here's just some different technical assistance resources that we have. I encourage you to look at this, look at these processes and things of that nature. For further technical assistance, you can go here. We have things listed via different offices and different opportunities coming up. I encourage you to work with TA providers too. They are essentially grantees as well. We award them a grant to be able to assist our tribal grantees in doing the work that they need to do under the various programs that they have been awarded under the CTAS umbrella. They are equipped to help you Indian alcohol, substance abuse, law enforcement, tribal courts, tribal civil and criminal legal assistance, corrections alternatives to incarceration, reentry, juvenile delinquency and prevention and juvenile justice. They can help you if you are stalled out on ways to implement your project or program. They can help you with that. They can help you figure out a way if you want to do a change of scope. Of course, you always need to consult with your grant program manager, but if you are struggling with ways to present that or approach that, they can help you with that. They can do one-on-one TA with you. They can do group TA with you. It's a plethora of things that they're able to assist you with. In addition, victim services, intergovernmental collaboration, information sharing, sex registration and notification act, domestic violence and sexual violence crimes. We have TA providers that are equipped all around the board on various subjects and topics to assist our grantees, and they're there. You shouldn't be scared of them. I know oftentimes when our TA providers reach out to grantees, particularly newer grantees, they're afraid. But no, they're a resource, just like your federal staff is a resource for you. So your federal staff is awarding TA providers to be able to assist you, because we can't do all of the work, and we're not as equipped in some of the areas as our technical assistance providers. But we have the TA providers there to assist. Next slide, please. Here's the Just Grants information that I mentioned earlier, email address, phone number, in case you need them. Response Center, tribal grants information is right there. And I think we have a poll question now.
Yes, we're going to go ahead and launch our second poll question. And just to follow up from the earlier poll question, now that we've been together for about 2 hours, the question is, I am confident in writing a CTAS grant narrative. And again, the responses are strongly disagree, disagree, agree, or strongly agree. And as you can see, we have 80% agree, 12% strongly agree, and 8% disagree. Now this compares to earlier, the first time we did this poll, only 62% agreed, and we had 25% disagreeing and 10% strongly disagreeing. So great work to our presenters today. And James, did you have any comments before we go into questions?
Nothing other than saying, certainly applicants, don't be afraid to reach out to us. You are never bothering us. We are here to assist you and help you in any way we can. You have the tribal grants at usdoj.gov email address. I encourage you to always use that. Certainly, I never have a problem with applicants reaching out to me, but just understand, depending on your question, I may just have to simply refer you to someone else. But if you feel comfortable reaching out to me and you'd rather reach out to me, I'm not opposed to that. But my first course of action would be to encourage you to go to the tribal grants email address, as we can direct you in all areas via there.
Excellent. And thanks again to James, Justine, and Leah for a great presentation today. And with that, we'll go ahead into our first questions. And that is, we have a tribe that has a BIA law enforcement on that they're working with, and they've been denied before to have a tribal police added on with Purpose Area 1, which they really need. They're just kind of wondering how to go about if they can apply for purpose area 1 with having BIA law enforcement?
So I know for a fact that, cops are fundable police officers are fundable under Purpose Area 1. I also know, and I believe that I'm not sure if my colleague Trish is still on the phone. I believe you can also ask for a police officer under Purpose Area 3. As to why they were not awarded under cops, I would do one or two things. The person asking that question, I would either send an email to the tribal grant. Actually, I'll tell you what, that person, send an email directly to me stating what your concern is, what your question is. I will put you directly in touch with the cops POC. They'll be able to get you your peer reviewer comments from the last application years to maybe provide some insight on why you weren't funded. And then they can also speak to you directly to let you know if maybe you were asking for something that you weren't able to. They'll be more equipped, but I can certainly make that connection today if you reach out to me. My email address is james.a.smith@usdoj.gov. That's James, JAMES, _A_Smith, SMITH, @usdoj.gov.
Great, thank you, James. And another question is, if you are writing for more than one purpose area, do you combine the totals on the SF424 that you submit in grants.gov?
So we're still trying to get 100% clarity on that question, but we do know that you can only submit one SF424. So right now I'm going to say yes, you're going to be combining that, but then when you get into Just Grants, there'll be some type of separation. There is more information to come, but I do know for a fact that you can only submit one SF424. So I would just, if you're applying, it only becomes a problem if you're applying for more than one purpose area. If you're only applying for one, then you're good. If you're applying for more than one, you're going to put that combined total there, and it'll be separated out later because grants.gov only allows you to submit one SF424.
Great, thank you, James. And another question is, if a tribe received a CTAS grant in a prior funding cycle for a purpose area, can another grant be received in the same purpose area, resulting in overlapping grant cycles?
Yes, but it's different per purpose area, so you need to look at each individual purpose area specific section in the solicitation to see, because guidance is given on whether or not there's restrictions. Some purpose areas say if you have one from the last year or the 2 previous years, you may not be eligible. Some don't care. So you have to read. It's not a blanket decision for all purpose areas across the board. You have to read it individually, but yes, that is certainly possible depending on the purpose area.
Thank you, James. And another question is regarding the submission deadlines. Can you please clarify the submission deadlines?
Absolutely. And I'm hoping that this doesn't change again. As of right now, and I'll be very clear, there's a couple of deadlines that you need to be familiar with. So the first deadline is March 16th. But understand when I say that, March 16th is not the deadline in which the CTAS application is due. It's the deadline in which you need to register in in grants.gov and do your SF424 and your SLLL. That's the deadline for that. So remember, grants.gov deadline, March 16th. Grants.gov deadline, March 16th. The deadline for submitting your CTAS application in Just Grants is Tuesday, March 30th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Deadline for submitting your CTAS application in Just Grants is Tuesday, March 30th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There's one more kind of quasi deadline I'm going to give to you that nothing happens if you don't do it, but I'm going to tell you why I strongly encourage you to follow this next deadline as well. So here's what I want going to tell you. We also, if you look at our fact sheet for CTAS, there's a deadline that states we encourage you to register for Just Grants by February 26th. Here's why I'm going to strongly encourage you to do that. So listen to my caveat on this one. If you don't already have a Just Grants, this only applies to you if you're completely new to Just Grants, you don't have an account set up, you don't have any other grants in there, you have no affiliation with Just Grants right now, that deadline is going to apply to you. If you already have grants and you already have an account with Just Grants, then you're fine. But these are for folks who don't currently have any awards, and you're going to be new to Just Grants in terms of creating an account and all that. You want to do that by February 26th because the system is new. So doing it a little over a month before the application is due, if you have any kind of problems with getting your account set up, we can have adequate time to get you assistance in getting that worked out. If you're waiting to the day of or the week beforehand, it could take a while. And I don't want any applicants, and we don't want any applicants to run into that problem. So again, February 26th only applies if you don't already have a Just Grants account. But if you have one, then it doesn't apply to you. Hopefully that makes sense. But the two major deadlines that you want to pay attention to, again, March 16th is the deadline for registering with grants.gov and completing your SF424 and your SFLLL. Tuesday, March 30th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is the deadline for the CTAS application.
Thank you, James.
No problem.
And is an applicant allowed to make changes or modifications between the March 16th and the March 30th deadline based on the forms they submit in grants.gov and what might be the end result in Just Grants?
I'm not 100% sure on that, but I will tell you that if you happen to put one amount on your your SF424, and you later need to change it and you can't, it's not a big deal because we're going to see the difference in your budget in that anyway. And if we're going to award you or want to award you, we're going to reach out and ask for that corrected information. So I'll find out if it can be changed, but if it can't, trust me, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to screw up your chances from being considered. So I don't want you to over stress about that. And because in most cases, a lot of times applicants are putting estimates anyway because they haven't done their budget yet. Typically, we get an exact amount from those who've already worked out their budget.
Thank you, James.
Mm-hmm.
Last night, grants.gov published a change, pushing back their deadline to a due date in April. They want to know whether there are date changes for the CTAS applications in Just Grants. They provided a little additional information that it states the original closing date for applications is March 16th, and now it's saying that the current closing date for applications is April 13th. So they're just looking for some additional clarification there. And again, that was on the grants.gov site.
Okay. I was hoping I didn't have to address this, but I guess I knew that this was coming. So I'll keep this as short and non-weedy as possible. There were some changes made to some DOJ solicitations yesterday with certain deadlines being extended. There is a possibility that some deadlines may have been changed with CTAS without folks realizing that it shouldn't have been, and we're in the process of trying to sort that out right now. So, excuse me, what I just gave you is what we originally put out, what is still on the Tribal and Safety Justice website, but I do have a meeting with some folks to figure out this Just Grants piece. I will follow up with anyone who registered for this webinar. I will get the email addresses from Fox Valley. We will make sure that you have the correct information before anything is due. So yeah, there is that Just Grants piece that was just updated that probably shouldn't have been, and I'm trying to get clarification on that. I would say for right now, stick with the original dates, and I will get back to you on what the end result will be. And I apologize for any confusion, but we're trying to work that out right now. Just stick with the original dates, but I promise you, you will be up to date. If anything, it's definitely a hard change with that. On all platforms, you'll be updated. E-Blast, website update, grants.gov update. I assure you, we will make sure you know. And if all else fails, you can always ask me.
Thank you, James. And we have another question regarding Purpose Area 9, possibly. They have an established juvenile healing to wellness court. Can they apply underneath Purpose Area 9 instead of Purpose Area 1?
Are they looking to like enhance a court that they already have? If that's the case, then yes, they can apply under Purpose Area 9. Probably Category 2 under Purpose Area 9.
Great, thank you, James.
Mm-hmm.
And where is the budget information that can be downloaded and used for the purpose areas?
Say that again?
Where is the budget information located that can be downloaded and used for the purpose areas?
Yeah, so yes, if you go to this web address here that says www.justice.gov/tribal/open solicitations, if you go there, if you go to that page, you're going to pull up the CTAS FY21 solicitation page. And there you will see all documents related to CTAS, and the budget is listed on that page. The budget workbook that you need to download is there. You're also going to see the solicitation. You're going to see FAQs. Well, they're coming later today, but you'll eventually see FAQs. You'll see miscellaneous documents. You'll see purpose area fact sheets. You'll see some legal documents. So you'll see everything there, and I think they're going to it now. So underneath of downloadable general template, there's the application timeline template. There's the application cover sheet template, which is where you will do your abstract. And then there's the tribal community and justice profile template. And directly underneath for that, you will see the budget detail workbook and budget narrative template. That is what you download and save to your computer. And make sure you enable the macros. It'll probably ask you to do that the moment you download it and open it, but do that so that you're able to work within it.
Great, thank you, James. And a question regarding grants or just grants. How does an agency know if they're registered with Just Grants? Is there a way they can check?
Well, do they have other? Well, I guess the easiest way to know, like, if you have current grants with DOJ, then you have to have one because it's the new management system. So the only way to manage your grants is to have a Just Grant account. So unless you just haven't set that up. And whoever's on the call, if it's not you, it may be someone else in your organization. The easiest way to do that, I think, would be to, reach out to the Just Grants help desk and just say you want to simply know that they're probably going to want a grant number. I guess my question is, for the person who just asked me that question, do you currently have grants with DOJ, current active grants? That would be helpful to know. Can you write back in the chat and let me know that so I can determine the best way to answer the question for you?
Okay, and while we wait for their response to come in, there is another question regarding the submission process, and that is, how can we tell, is there an area in the solicitation that breaks down what gets submitted to grants.gov specifically versus Just Grants?
And I just want to make sure I understood the question. Are they asking me, is there something that breaks down what gets submitted on grants.gov versus just grants?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So it'll tell you on the solicitation, but the only things that you're submitting on grants.gov would be your SF424 and your SFLLL. Everything else is going to be just grants. And it very clearly tells you in the solicitation, like, what it, and matter of fact, while I'm answering the question, I will go and I'll just pull it up just so I can see exactly what it says for you. 1 second. So I'm opening the solicitation now. And let's scroll down and see what instructions it gives you. Okay, so it doesn't exactly say it in those terms, but I'll read to you what it does say. It says it under the technical assistance information for submitting this application. It says for technical assistance with submitting your SF424 and your SLLL and grants.gov, here's the contact information for grants.gov. But I read that to let you know that those are the only two things that you're submitting in grants.gov. Everything else is just grants. So hopefully that's clear.
Thank you, James. And we do have a follow-up regarding the individual looking to see how they can tell if their agency is registered with Just Grants. They did respond to say they are a new grant writer. The tribe does not have a comprehensive list of existing or past grants, so they're trying to they're trying to figure out this piece just to see if they need to register or not in the system by that February deadline.
I can approach this one or two ways in trying to help them. So what I'm gathering is they're saying that the grantee or the tribe doesn't currently have any active DOJ grant, is what I'm gathering. If that's the case, then you're probably going to need to be set up. And so in that case, you're going to need to contact the Just Grants help desk, and they can walk you through getting set up. But I guess we need to determine, for the person that asked that question, can you send me an email directly to james.a.smith@usdoj.gov, ask your question, give me the full tribe's name. If you know your DUNS number and your OJP vendor number, let me know. And I want to try and do a search in Just Grants. I won't do it while I'm on the call, but I'll try to do a search later today or tomorrow to see if I pull the tribe up and what it is. And if I don't, then what you're going to need to do is reach out to the Just Grants help desk, and they can walk you through the steps of setting up an account and all that good stuff. But on the flip side, you're probably going to need to do your SF424 and SFLLL first, so they know that you have an intent of applying to something, and then they can work with you on setting up the account.
Thank you, James. And regarding Purpose Area 9, we have an individual who reached out for reviewer feedback on their Purpose Area 9 submission from last year. They have not heard back, and they want to know how long it takes to receive that feedback, because they were really hoping to see that before deciding whether or not to apply, or if or a better approach for this year's submission.
Ask that question one more time.
We have an individual who reached out for peer reviewer feedback on last year's Purpose Area 9 submission. They haven't heard back yet, and they want to know how long it takes to get those peer review comments. Their department is really hoping to see that before deciding whether or not to apply this year, or if there's a better approach for this year's submission if they do determine to apply.
And which purpose area did they apply to last year? Did they say that?
Purpose Area 9.
Okay. I know someone reached out to me this morning for comments, and I believe that Kara sent them. I'm not sure if it's the same person. However, the person that needs those comments, please send me an email directly, and I will put you in touch with the person who can get you the comments. My email is james.a.smith@usdoj.gov. Please state your full tribe's name, the year in which you applied, and I can make sure that you get your comments.
Thank you, James. And another question is, when I opened the application in grants.gov, it did not trigger an application in Just Grants like it's supposed to. How did they proceed, and is that being fixed?
So is the person that's asking this question, have they already done their SF424 and their SFLLL, and did they receive any type of information? And my next question would be, was it the same person that did the information in grants.gov that is also trying to look for it in Just Grants? So if that person can write back with those responses, then I'll figure out how to best answer you and how to get you help.
Perfect. And I'm just following up with that individual to get additional information.
What was that? Are we waiting for that person? Were there any other questions while we're waiting?
Yep, I just reached back to them to get additional information. They did respond. Oh, they started the SF424 and the SFLLL on the same account as Just Grants, so it should have triggered the application in Just Grants. I'm sorry, they would have started it in grants.gov, the SF424 and LLL on the same account, so it should have triggered the app in Just Grants.
Whoever that individual is, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I promise I'm a person that can get answers very quickly. If you email me directly, tell me what the problem is, I will make sure to get you in touch with someone who can answer that for you. That is not my area of expertise. I don't know the technical part of it. To my understanding, it's supposed to happen that way, but it could be something techie going on that I'm unfamiliar with. But just email me directly, and rest assured, I will get you the assistance that you need.
Okay, and we don't have additional questions at this time. As a reminder, we do have upcoming webinars. We did make an announcement at the beginning of this webinar that the Just Grants webinar on February 4th, that is going to be rescheduled. Information on that is forthcoming. So February 4th right now is canceled. Additional information on that is forthcoming. So our next webinar will be on Tuesday, February 9th, and that's at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and that will be on the budget development. And there is a question that just came in. With Just Grants being a new system, will there be another opportunity within the month for a webinar?
That is our goal. And just to be 100% transparent, we had a webinar scheduled for January 4th, as Christina mentioned, for Just Grants to present to the CTAS applicants. But what we didn't know prior to last week is that Just Grants was already working on a series of webinars as it relates to Just Grants and how you apply for solicitation, and also what you need to do in grants.gov. So they reached out to us, the CTAS team, and just wanted to know if we could direct folks to attend those different webinars, because it'd be more than one, that would work out better. And so we agreed. And so we're just waiting on the new dates. And I have some tentative dates, but I can't share them yet, just waiting for those to be finalized. But I suspect by the end of the week or early next week, they'll be finalized and we'll be able to share that information. But there will be more than one webinar geared towards how you submit applications by our Just Grants team. And we will be making sure that everyone on this webinar gets that information. If you don't hear anything within the next week or so, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly, and I'll let you know what I know at that point. But I suspect we will probably have something finalized way before then. Like I said, I do have some tentative dates yet, but I just can't release those and just waiting on a few things. But I am almost certain that webinars about Just Grants and how you submit applications will happen before this month is out.
Thank you, James.
Mm-hmm.
And for additional information on solicitation requirements and supporting documents, please go to the justice.gov/tribal/open-solicitations for additional information on the solicitation, as well as templates and other resources.
Sure. I would just like to add a few additional things. First, I just want to say thanks to everyone for calling in. We certainly appreciate you calling in and giving us your attention today. I know you could have been 1,000 other places, but well, virtually that is. But we're just happy that you joined our call today. Hopefully this has been helpful. Certainly reach out to me anytime. While I encourage you reach out to the Tribal Grants email box first, that's a better approach. If you don't hear back from that in a reasonable amount of time, please don't hesitate to contact me directly and I can get you answers. Even if I don't know them, I can put you in touch with someone. But I just encourage you to thoroughly read the solicitation. Also, we're going to be coming out with a document within the next 2 days that's going to give you more detailed information on each purpose area in CTAS and the funding that's available for it this year. The solicitation on Just Grants is a little different than how our solicitations have looked in the previous years. And so we just want to make sure that you have some additional spotlight information on what is eligible in the meat and potatoes of each purpose area this year that's in FY21 CTAS and what's being offered under each purpose. So that document's probably going to come out within the next day or two. We're going to be putting it on the website, probably directly under the solicitation. We'll also be e-blasting it out. We'll also mention it on future webinars and all that good stuff. So don't worry, you won't be missing out on anything. And if you feel like you don't get it and it's been a week or two, reach out to me directly and I can email it to you personally. But at least allow like the next week first before you do that. I also encourage you just to start getting things ready now. Start doing some preliminary work, and please, please, please pay attention to the deadlines. I'll get you solid information on if any of those deadlines are changing. But for right now, just stick with what you originally have. But I promise I will let you know if anything changes. And we will let you know if anything changes. Also, try to finish your applications at least 2 weeks in advance so you have a good time to good amount of time to proofread, double check everything, and make sure that you have everything you need. And then, get your application in so you're not rushing, because I've seen tons of horror stories where people wait for the last minute and they submit things with track changes. And unfortunately, we have to accept it that way. How you submit it, we have to accept it. Comments that they never meant for us to read, versions that don't look very well polished, submitting wrong documents. So when you rush, you tend to make those kind of mistakes, forgetting to submit things. Unfortunately, we understand how easy it is to forget to submit something, but that's not anything that we're able to do anything about because it's looked at as poor planning. So we just ask you to please try to not wait for the last minute so you don't make those kind of mistakes. Again, you're never, ever bothering us. We are here for a resource. Reach out to the Tribal Grants at usdoj.gov email address. Reach out to me personally. We will try our best to get you what you need. And we thank you for working with us through this adjustment period. I know for those of you who are currently working with Just Grants, it is an adjustment. It is an adjustment for us as well. But I am certain that once all the kinks and bugs are worked out, and that is normal with any new system, that this will be a great system for both you guys and us. So we just continue to ask for your patience, and we appreciate you sticking with us through all of this. And I just encourage all of you who are interested to definitely apply.
Thanks, James.
And this is Leah. I just wanted to thank all of you for your service and the hard work that you do in serving all of your respective communities, and say happy grant writing. Thank you.
Thank you all for participating. I just know that, like Leah said, you have important work that you're doing in your communities, and I'm grateful also for all that you do for your community, and we wish you well in your grant writing this season.
Thanks, Leah. Thanks, Justine. James, did you have any other final items you would like to share?
Nope, just be on the lookout for the Just Grants webinars and then all of the other additional CTAS pre-application webinars we have coming up, the budget webinars, the individual purpose area webinars for those purpose areas you may be interested in. Keep constantly checking the Tribal Safety and Justice open solicitation website that houses the CTAS FY 2021 page for updates and downloadable forms that you will need to do your application. And just don't hesitate to reach out to us. You are never, ever bothering us. We want your questions. We want to make sure that we're helping you be able to submit the best application possible.
And we hope you can join us for future fiscal year 2021 CTAS webinars. Again, that future webinar list is located on the justice.gov/tribal/grants website under open solicitations. And our next webinar is Tuesday, February 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and that is the budget development webinar. Thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon, and I hope everyone has a great remainder of their day.